You are all set.
Okay, so let's get started. So we'll call the meeting to order. It's 6:37. The first item on the agenda is a chairperson report. Essentially, this is an opportunity for me to just bring up anything that may not be listed on the agenda, but like last meeting, we had a new member, Erica. Welcome again. We do have another new member that replaced Nancy Bailey, who resigned, and that's Ralph Tulis. Ralph, if you want to say hello, welcome to the committee.
Hello, everyone. I hope this proves interesting.
So the next order of business is the approval of the meeting minutes from April 7th. Is there a motion on the table to approve the meeting minutes?
So moved.
Erica, second. Jean, or Anne, I'm sorry. I was looking at your last name. So second, meeting minutes approved. All in favor?
Discussion, just in case
Oh,
there's
discussion. Any discussion about the last minute?
I'm going to abstain from voting on this because I wasn't a member at that time, although I was at the meeting. So just mark me down as abstaining on that vote.
You got it. All right, so should we take another vote? I'm sorry, but was there any discussion? Let's start there. I'm sorry, I forgot. Okay, motion to move. Erica, I think you first it, right? And Jean seconded it. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions? We've got one.
I'll be an abstention also. I wasn't here last week.
And that was Nick, right?
That was Justin.
Justin, I'm sorry. I'll get it, I promise.
It's okay.
Wouldn't it be wise just to do a roll call on the votes?
Okay, thank you.
I've got it.
Yeah, she's got it. So 2 abstentions.
No, what I meant is some committees do roll call each individual member and ask for their vote. Sometimes I think that's a little bit clearer, just me.
Thank you. So communications, the next item are, so there's been a couple requests from the committee members to have a tour of the buildings, the hall, school, and center school. We
I think he's
open it up.
present to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry. Boy, I'm blowing it today, huh?
Yeah, they do it all the
I'm
time.
sorry. Is there anybody present to speak? If there is, please identify yourself and where you live. Thank you.
You should be able to unmute yourself, folks that are not on camera, if you are present to speak. Erica Bouchard, can you say hi?
Hello?
Okay. We have her on the phone. You just have a wicked echo, so you're gonna have to turn one down. Okay, perfect. I don't think you have anybody to speak because I can see who else is in the meeting.
Okay, so now we'll go to communications. So as I said, there were a few requests that I got via email from our committee members requesting a tour of the buildings, the hall school and center school, more of an information gathering to just get familiar with the buildings, and the superintendent, Phil Stevens, has offered to arrange for that. The likelihood of all of us going at once is slim. So Phil offered we could get a sign up sheet to see who's interested, and then Phil can determine what days he's available to do that. And Phil, you mentioned no more than 3 at a time, I think.
I think our max is 5 because otherwise we have to post a meeting. I don't count in that quorum, I don't believe, because I can't vote. So your max is 5. So if there's more than 5 people that want to tour Center School and Hall School, we could just do it in 2 groups and, do it after hours, school hours. So people can walk the buildings and see kind of what's what. We could arrange it once the staff's out of the building in the evening sometime. But it would not be a public meeting, it would not be open.
So as I mentioned, there were a couple people from the committee that mentioned it. Maybe it'd be best to just find out if there's anybody not interested in going, anybody that's on the call tonight, that if you all want to be put on the list to have an opportunity to tour, we can arrange that. So just if you know the buildings inside and out and you don't need a tour, then you're all set, Erica? Okay. Anybody else not interested? Okay, so we'll put everybody else that's here tonight for the building committee members. We'll include Gary and Mike is here now. I think Gary was the only other one that we're missing, right? So we'll include him in the list. So everybody minus Erica, and then Phil, if you want to send me a couple.
I can organize it. I'll
Yeah.
just have Brenda organize it.
Okay. Sounds good. And you mentioned it's going to be after hours, right? After school.
Correct.
Okay. Is there any questions about that?
Bless you.
Hi, Peter.
Hello, sorry to be late.
Erica, Ralph Tillis, just so you know, for the most part, I'm available just about any time, any day. I do have a project going on Baxter Road that requires my attention with minimal notice. So we're replacing a foundation under condos. So other than that, I'm relatively free.
Okay. Well, it has to be coordinated among the school's schedule because we're
I
not.
understand.
Yeah. So
I understand.
Phil offered to organize that. So we'll wait to hear back from Phil. on
Yeah,
that.
I'll put a few dates out in different times so people can kind of email back their availability for each of the times and dates, just so there's a variety, and then we'll just organize it based upon the numbers.
I just, a little footnote, when Phil sends that out, if it goes out to the entire committee and you respond back, just reply, don't reply all, so it doesn't become a meeting amongst the members.
Oh, good point.
We will send it as a BCC.
We all
Um,
love reply all so much, don't we?
So let's move into old business. There's a couple items here. The first one is an update on the OSCGR visit that last week we shared, or last month we shared the preliminary review of some information about the schools that we were going to review with the OSCGR, and along with the questions that the committee came up with. And so it was a good visit. It was very good fact finding. And Phil, we put together sort of a summary of what was discussed, and Phil's going to run through that quickly here.
So this is just really real simple kind of overview. We actually did have the director, Costa Diamantis, did show up himself, did not bring any members of his team. So we are lucky to have what I'll say is the head honcho. He came in, he's the director for the Office of School Construction Grants and Review and DAS. So he's a very important person in this process. We tried to just pull together some highlights of the visit and put it into bullets. So it was for the committee. This is in your email, all of you now. And this, I believe, Catherine, you want to put this on the website under Office of School, it's under Office of School Construction. Me too,
Yes.
Catherine. Under the building committee. So we started at Hall School, and he asked a ton of questions. We gave him our handout that we had developed with the data in it, and he asked about enrollment. He asked about enrollment projections. He was curious to know if we had thought about swing space, if we needed it for, if we'd done if we're going to do a project. And he asked about the age of the buildings, what was the new section of the building, what's the older sections of the building, and then when were the additions done, and all of that data was within our packet. Based on the information that we provided in that handout, he came out and very boldly just said they would not support funding for renovating either building. His primary reasons were the age of the buildings, the condition of the buildings, and the projected enrollment. And one of the things that he clarified for us was that they do not support renovation projects when there is less than 400 students per building. So, we were going in looking for some direction, just to see what he thought. And, his comments about Hall School were really, it's got good exterior, but when we talk about the interior, has no ventilation, needs ventilation, needs all of the interior would need to be redone. So some significant items. We spent some time with him walking through Hall and talked outside for a few minutes. He wanted to see the grounds, because he did ask about building on site if something new could go on site. And was not interested in going to see Center School based upon the data that we gave him. He did offer to come and talk to this committee at a public meeting, and answer any questions. That's exactly what he did for Mansfield. I think it was helpful for the committee and the public. He did recommend for members of the committee to go and look at some of the newer buildings that have been done in the last few years that they've completed. He was talking about the new Birch Grove in Tolland being open in August, September. That would be a building that he would recommend us going to see, and named another one, I think, in Farmington. But that was it was something that he suggested that would be helpful for us to do. And then this was the hitter that about knocked me off my kneecaps myself. We were talking about process, and because we're in the middle of a roof projects, our roof project applications are in. We have our state contract numbers, which means they've approved the project, and he basically came out and said, time out, stop what you're doing, because he did not think it was fiscally responsible to approve funding through the state if we're considering some sort of building project, new building renovation. And really, we wrote new building in this because that's what he was recommending. So I'm waiting to hear back from his office, because he said he was going to go back and talk to his team about this. But that's a kind of a byproduct of something that I didn't expect coming out of this. But that's kind of an overview of the site visit. Catherine, anything you want to add to what's there?
No, I think the only thing I was going to say was, when he talked about not supporting a renovation of a school that had less than 400 students, I'm not sure if the committee knows, but there's 200 students at Center roughly and 200 at Hall. And so just the student enrollment alone was one of the things that he basically said, no, they wouldn't support it. So that was the only thing I was going to say. I wasn't sure if people knew what the numbers were.
Erica?
Yeah, can I add? He asked us about doing demo, was speaking of Hall School, demoing and using that same site if we had considered that. We expressed him that we're pretty early on in this, but I did not think there was an appetite in this town to completely demolish that building. So it's not that we didn't consider it. We haven't gotten to that point in our process, but I did not believe there was an appetite to do that, to demo that building and rebuild a brand new facility on that site. And that would take lots of talk by this board, but I see Mike shaking his head. I would be really surprised if the town supported that. I think that building is important.
Yeah.
in our community. And if we do not use it for a school, I believe it might have other life, but so we were honest with him about that.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Erica, he did ask about the hall site itself, if that was a potential spot for a new school, and there's just not enough land. And so that was, when he asked that question, that was the response, is that there's just not enough land there. There's only 14 acres, I believe that.
Correct.
Mhm. I think he did say, if I correct me, Phil and Catherine, that there could be some allotment for us if we use the same site. There might be a possibility of that, but it would mean demoing that building,
Right,
taking that building completely down. And that's where I really didn't think, he asked if the town supported it.
right.
And I felt pretty comfortable saying I didn't think we'd get support for that.
If I could just comment on that, I imagine, just sort of having lived here my whole life, as many of you have as well, that the only chance we would get close to something like that would be if we did some sort of a surgical save of the facade, as some projects architecturally save the facade, so that they're actually keeping the character
Right.
section and actually keeping some of the real pieces of that section, so someone can touch a brick and say this is original. That, like,
Yeah.
that sort of emotional connection is important, and that may be the only way we get close to demolishing the whole building, if we can somehow surgically maintain that front section of the original school.
Mike, he actually mentioned something like that. He said you could do what West Hartford did, at the Yukon campus there.
That's exactly what I was thinking of, the Times
Yeah.
building.
But we still have the issue of not having enough land, even if
Right.
portions of it were demolished, it still becomes a hardship, not being able to meet the requirements that they require,
The other, if I can, Catherine, the other piece,
Yeah.
Mike, that came up was, that building is 63,000 square feet. And he was really struggling to figure out how you could renovate that building in a manner to move the youngest students in. The pre-K K1, and it was all about the stairs, because
Right.
that building is top to bottom. It basically goes underground. And to put a gym and all, you need to put all of your, what I'll call the unified arts
Services.
classes. Yeah, they need to be accessible by those groups.
Mhm.
And how do you do that on the first floor of one building? And that's why he said you just couldn't do that here with the current way it is. Even with a full gut, it would be near impossible.
Can I ask a
That would
question,
be a challenge.
Catherine?
Who's
Ralph,
that,
Ralph,
Ralph?
Um,
Sure, go ahead.
when we talk about 20 acres of land, well, my question is, how much of it are we actually utilizing for the building footprint and the fields?
I believe it's 20 acres.
No. You don't
Yeah, I
have
think the minimum, whatever they say is required it's based on number of students, I believe, Phil. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But
The acreage is, and it's also, the acreage is based upon the square footage of the building, but based upon, they have a calculation. He was actually running it that day.
Yeah.
When we were standing there, and we are about 19 usable acres is their requirement, is what we.
what actually goes on those 19 acres, Mr. Stevens?
That's all your fields, the building, the parking, basically everything that you have.
I don't
Okay.
think they broke it out. They didn't separate it, if that's what you're looking for, Ralph. They didn't separate acreage for footprint, acreage for fields.
Correct.
Because there's nothing to preclude a two-story building as long as we accommodate K1 on the lower level, correct? Is that a fair assumption?
For a
Yes,
new
sorry.
school, you mean?
I'm sorry?
For a new school, you mean?
For any school with any
Yeah,
funding from OSC.
Yeah.
I'm nodding my head, but I don't know if you can see me. So yes, a two-story is a reasonable accommodation as long as the main floor as accessible for all those programs, just basically like center is now for handicap accessibility. One of the he actually talked about was at Hartford. He talked about a building in Hartford they were doing, and he said typically, and Mike, you had asked a question about this of going up, and we did try and answer some of these questions on the next page.
Yeah.
Could you build up? And his response was, you could do that in the higher grades. The higher grades you go, it's easier to do that. The lower grades, it's not, because that's where you get into the fire code issue of, ground level access and programmatic access. So you could have a 2-story for sure. It doesn't, there's nothing that says you can't do that. But that was
Okay. All right. So in a word, yes, it is possible to do it that way.
correct.
I really didn't need the detailed explanation, but that's fine. I'm still concerned about
So
the
Phil,
acreage.
maybe,
I'm concerned about the acreage because I think the 20 acres requirement for an enrollment of 400 or less, and we really need to update the projections, by the way, because we're looking at birth rates that go back to 2015 that are estimates. And, I'd like to have something a little bit more concrete to see what the trend is as far as Willington's birth rate. I mean, 2015 begins estimates from there forward. That doesn't help us as far as real planning. And I'm looking at the Fryer report, by the way. Do we have more current data on birth rates?
Yes, and it's on the website with the items, and we would still have to do, if you put in an application, you have to have the most current enrollment projections. You can't apply without them. And so
Okay.
they would be done by either Dr. Peter Prouda, or you'd pay, there's, different agencies that do it. NASDAQ does them. There's another agency that is in the state that does them, but it's a requirement. And that's actually, Ralph, how they calculate the size of the building that you can build
Understood.
or renovate. It's based on the highest number of students in 8 years.
Well, that's great, but we still don't have current data that I can find. If you've got it squirreled away somewhere on a Google Drive, that's great, but I'd love to see what the actuals are for the most recent years we have them.
Does Ralph not have access to the Google Drive? Is that what
I have
No,
I have
he's-
every file that was on the Google Drive.
so maybe I don't want to derail the meeting, but we can get you that information, Ralph. I'll probably need some assistance from Phil to get exactly where that is, but we can get you the latest that we have. And I thought we had more recent data than 2015. But let's move on. I
That's
know
fine.
Phil, you just he unshared his screen, and so let me just highlight some of the questions that were on that last page of the preliminary meeting
I'm getting there, sorry.
packet that we shared with you. And I think Phil, you were gonna go into those and
Yeah, sorry, I was
you
just
know-
trying to get back to it.
yeah.
So and these are real simple answers, just based upon what we heard that day, but basically this stated over, he would not support renovating either building. Age, condition, enrollment projections were his primary reasons. Same reason for a new building. And he didn't feel like Hall's status as a historical building would impact his recommendation. We did not ask him all of these questions on the bottom. We didn't get to that point. But there was, some questions about procedures and COVID, would that impact at all? Or any barriers right now with applications, anything like that? And he said, no, there's nothing holding back. So the other questions that did not get asked at the walkthrough can be asked at when he comes in, when we invite him in. And some of the other questions we actually didn't even ask him point blank. He was just sharing it as the information as we walk through the building. if anybody has.
So is there any,
Yeah.
if there's any discussion, he did, we thought it was great that he did actually volunteer his time to come to one of our meetings. So we are coordinating a time for him to join us. So if you do have questions, I know there were a few people that had some additional questions that didn't make the list. Please have those ready. And when we do nail down the date of when he's going to join our meeting, we'll let everybody know. So you can have your questions ready. And like I said, he was more than willing to come to one of our meetings and answer any questions that the members had.
Yeah, Catherine, he really stressed that, he wanted it to be a Q&A and he welcomed that. So he wants, to hear what we have, what we want to hear from him or things we just aren't sure about.
So as Phil mentioned, this document will be on the Google Drives, and it's also should be in everyone's email as of this evening. So you have that. If you do have any other questions, we can talk about it in our next meeting. But unless there's no discussion, we can move on to the next old business item, which is the facts document.
Catherine Peters waving
Oh,
his hand.
I'm sorry.
I apologize, Catherine. I had a couple of questions based on how Phil conveyed the tone of your meeting. And I guess the question I have to all of you that were there, so we're at somewhat of a disadvantage, is what Phil just commented on about our roof project possibly being in jeopardy. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this committee has made no decisions yet, even on the feasibility of a new school, if a new school is required, what that school would be, new, old, renovated, or otherwise. So I don't understand why this state official would make a comment that we're being irresponsible by pursuing a project that was approved 2 years ago or more, unless the group that was with him represented that our committee is seeking only a new school. So my question is that the case? And if it isn't, why are we in this situation?
So if I can answer just the first part of it, and then maybe Mr. Stevens, you can answer the part about the roof projects. When he was on site with us, we did mention that we are going to be seeking funding for a project next year. We can't do anything until we have funding and buy-in from the state. So that's kind of what triggered the question. And then Phil, if you want to add the piece about the roof project.
Yeah, I can't speak to why he felt that way, Peter, other than his feeling is if you're going to, I think he almost felt slighted, to be honest with you. I think he felt like we were trying to get 2 new roofs on 2 buildings and then build a building and walk away from it. That was what my sense I got from him, because he's been around the block and that's probably happened to him before. That's obviously not our intent. But I will also tell you that the letter for the roof projects for the approval goes through 2023 for the funding. And so his statement may be connected to, I want you to hold tight until you figure out if you're going to do a school building project or a renovation project. And if you're not, then your fund will move forward with your funding. But if you are, and his timeline was significantly faster, I think the 3 of us were a little shocked that if he was talking about, and he used Birch Grove as an example, that they've built a building that I think is significantly bigger, but I can't remember what he said, in 2 years. And they will be opening in August. So, his thought was, if you're going to do an application, if you did an application for something in June of 2022, you'd know by February of 2023. And you could put a shovel in the ground in 2023 of July, potentially. And then you could be moving into that building in 2025. So 4 years was way faster than I'd heard. And he was just using Birch Grove as an example. But I mean, we can ask him directly, Peter, about the roof project, but he holds the purse strings. And let's be clear, he let us know that. He said to us point blank, I am the majority holder. I am the investor. I represent the state. And with your 55% reimbursement, we are the majority. And he shared that. So he's trying to protect state money, I think is what his point is.
I
And,
find that,
oh, I'm sorry.
please
Go ahead,
continue.
Peter.
I waive the floor.
Anne?
I don't know if I'm remembering correctly, but did the board recommend repairing the roof initially and the Board of Finance decided to go with the new roofs? Am I remembering that correctly or no?
I mean, I can answer that. The answer is yes.
Okay, if we are not able to use the state funding, would our portion cover repairs? So that the roofs would be functional until, if and when we do have a new building? Just a question. I don't even need an
Yeah.
answer, just something to think about.
I haven't even shared this with the Board of Ed yet, so
Okay.
I'm hesitant to speak publicly about it beyond what I've
Thank you.
shared. The Board of Ed is going to be receiving a notification from me. I am on the Board of Finance agenda for tomorrow night to give them an update of just exactly what you just heard, what was told of me. I don't know what he's going to tell, the director is going to tell us to do moving forward.
Is there any more discussion? Shall we move on to the facts document? This is also under old business, the FAQ document.
Yeah, I mean, this should be quick. I haven't had a ton of time to update this. Ann worked on it. Gary worked on it. I spent some time on it today. We're down to 3 pages. And what we did was there was a lot of questions in there from the past that were more board questions up to the Board of Ed side to get for them problem solving through, and they didn't seem to make sense in the mix. Those have been eliminated now, and it's really just about this committee. There's a really, I think, clear statement of how we got here. That the board went through the process. There was a facility study. It explains that, and then there's some questions below that are meant to be 100% non-biased, factual. How much land do we need? Why is that? If you were going to build a building, how big could it be? How does the reimbursement work? All of those questions. So people have the answers to those. And then I believe it was Mansfield's that we saw that we really liked. Is any of the new questions as they come in that we feel like we should be sharing with people, we will just put at the top and we'll just date it. So that way people can see the initial thought, but we're going to need another meeting to finalize it. And we also have a Willington Wire, and doesn't know this yet either. We have a Willington Wire article that would be due. Catherine, I figure the committee can write something up, share it with you. If you approve it, then we can get it out through the Willington Wire and share that next time.
Okay.
Catherine, I have a question about the FAQs. And
Okay.
it goes back to the student population, the 400 number that Phil had mentioned earlier. Less than 400 means they will not contribute towards renovation or towards new construction, or both. Can you clarify that for me? And I think it's a very important piece of information to clarify for the taxpayers.
He basically said he would not support a renovation for a school with any any population under 400. And that was per building. So you have to look at these renovations. If we were to maintain one school or both schools, or try to put everything in one school, he would not support a renovation for students under 400.
How about new?
New, he would. If it was a new building, they would support it. But again, it has to meet that enrollment requirement.
What enrollment requirement? Please clarify that for me.
For minimum of 400.
For
No.
new?
So
No,
No,
it's not from 400.
I think he
The-
only
the-
said that for regarding renovation is how I recall it. He didn't really talk about numbers as required
Okay.
in a new build. But
No,
we
but-
did tell him the charge of the committee was to consolidate and form a pre-K through 8 school.
the
Okay.
enrollment is critical because the enrollment is what dictates the size of if you are going to build new, it dictates the size of the building that you can build. So with about 400 students, you could build approximately a 58,000 square foot building. If you had more than that, and they have this is all in their calculations.
Yeah.
If you build over that, you are penalized for that square footage.
Okay,
Just like if they ever decided to renovate Hall School, we would be penalized because Hall School is oversized based upon our current enrollment.
I understand all of that, okay? The point that I'm trying to make is there's two options. There's renovate, there's build new. Now, you've got to differentiate that if you're going to put this in an FAQ so that the taxpayers understand that we're hamstrung if we try to renovate and consolidate into one building. But if we build new, then the restrictions with respect to grant money changes. The
Absolutely.
two different scenarios have to be put in front of the taxpayers. That's my point.